Good evening. Tonight is Reader's Theater, um, 9 stories under the heading People of the Passion, written by Mary Betten in the late 1970s. I think the stories stand the test of time. A couple of housekeeping notes. Restrooms are out these doors. If for some reason we have a little rumble, a little earthquake that makes you feel nervous, please just hang on right where you are, and Liz and I will direct you out the doors when we feel that it is safe. We respectfully acknowledge and recognize that All Saints Episcopal Church of the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles is located on the unceded land of the Chula, Gabrieliano, Serrano, and Luis Oy tribes. This land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for the original caregivers and for their relatives today. And so tonight we are honored to add our blessings to the land that was and is held by the indigenous peoples who call it home. We pray that the greater Riverside community will treat the land with respect and give thanks to the Creator who made it. And now, People of the Passion.
I love the wheat fields. I could stand in them forever and feel the sun on my face. Sometimes when no one is looking, I lay down in the warm wheat and watch it wave back and forth, tiny golden flags in the open sky. The countryside is my home. My father sent me out for hire, and my pay is sent back to him. I'm a servant here in the palace of Caiaphas in Jerusalem. It has been 2 years since I've waved wheat, since I've seen the waving wheat or smelled the open air. I come from Galilee. I miss the soft accents of my people there and their easy way of life. Our house is near the Sea of Galilee. The sea, like the wheat fields, has a life and schedule all its own. I think the sea even has its own people. I remember them from the mornings I'd rush to my shutters and throw them open to the sounds of fishermen preparing their nets for the day. Their work is a dance to the music of the sea. Their talking and laughing is the song I miss. Oh, and their jokes. Fishermen tell wonderful jokes. They throw back their heads and laugh into the wind. When I go to bed in my tiny, stuffy cubicle at the top of the palace, I dream about the sea. I see myself opening the shutters, I hear the familiar voices, and I feel safe. My father has promised I can come home at the end of the year if I don't get in trouble. It's hard to stay indoors at night when my work is finished. It's stuffy in my room, the air is so tight, and there is no one to talk to. There was a wonderful man warming himself at the fire in the courtyard last week. I knew 2 things about him when I heard his voice. He was a fisherman, and he was from Galilee. They were holding a prisoner in the palace who was arrested for what he preached, and I had seen this man with him when he was preaching. I got so excited thinking I could identify someone by their accent, After all, it isn't very often anyone around here listens to me. It would be fun to feel important, and most of all, the man might talk to me about home. So when I came out to the fire to get his attention, I told everyone he was a friend of the prisoner and he was from Galilee. He got angry so quickly and started shouting denials. There was a great disturbance, and the other men around the fire yelled back, and in the middle of the shouting and denying, a cock even crowed in the courtyard. The man seemed to lose all sense of reason, as though the cock had called his name. Everything was bedlam. Word got back to my father, and I won't be going home. And that man, that gruff, wild, wonderful fisherman, my friend from a distance, if only I could explain. I was just acting on impulse, showing off. Do you understand? I wish there was some way to let him know. I'm sorry.
I work with trees. I go alone to cut them, always aware of how they breathe and drink the rain and catch the loud sounds in their branches. Give me back a sweet silence. When I chop, I listen to the rhythm I make and think about my longings. Down the cypress tree in one piece. Or crucifixions. They pay me well. Once the cypress is cut, she never springs up again. But the Romans don't care. The olive tree will grow again, though, from the smallest graft to the oldest stump. She is a noble tree. But the waving cypress is like a wanton woman, promising her beauty, then leaving after one night. When I tear away her branches, I think of the thieves and the slaves who will feel her against their legs and die in shame. Sometimes I sing to the rhythm my chopping makes. My echo tells me, soon I'll be too old for my job, unable to lift the wood and stand straight. Yet the olive tree will rise again from the oldest stump, while I will die. How proud I'd be to leave my mark on the tree of generations yet to come. But the law forbids cutting the olive tree. Like a valiant woman, she toils, making light for the lamps and oil for anointing. When I head back to Jerusalem, the donkey pulls the poles slowly. Some are longer than others. I flex my hands and study the furrow the longest pole is made in the muddy road. I walk in the deep rut, thinking of the sound the coins will make in my pouch when the gates of the city are behind me. It is April, and the fruit trees' innocent blossoms peek from their buds. That reminds me, it is Passover, and the pilgrims will be coming to the city. There is no time to spare. I must deliver the poles to the Romans and leave to avoid the crowds. There won't be time to drink my fill of wine and drown my longings. With the coin safely in my pouch, I make my way toward the gate, knowing it'll be difficult to get through. The crowd is surrounding 3 men on their way to be crucified. The soldiers seem louder than usual, and the crowd is an odd assortment. I see the first man stumble and fall, and when I hear the soldiers' reaction, I fear what they might ask next. So I crouch down, not to be noticed. They call louder for a strong man to come, assist the condemned. I notice a tall, muscular man ahead of me. I push him forward, staying carefully hidden. They order the man I pushed to help carry the cross. I burrow my way through the people as I ask for his name. A deep voice booms, "Simon of Cyrene." "Help him," the soldiers yell. "He is the Messiah. It's an honor." The soldiers laugh, slapping each other on the back. I'm careful not to look at the face of the man who will eventually soil the cypress. I'm almost free from this trap, almost out the gate. An unknown force in my head begins chanting to the rhythm of my running. It is the same beat as my chopping sound. I feel the longing come over me. Look back. Look back. Look at the man's face. Look at the man's face. But I run, ignoring the longing, pushing myself free. At last, the gate is behind me. My own sense of order returns. Further down the road, I see a new place is opened where I can drink my fill and forget. Tomorrow I'll head back to the forest, chop the same trees, get perhaps more money, and sing my songs of longing. I just do my job. But I wish there was more.
Probably I'm the only person you've ever met who can say that all of my dreams have come true. I've had 3 dreams in my life. The first started when I was 16 and kept recurring. I could fly. Did you ever dream that you could fly? My diviner says flying dreams are normal in the teen years. Danger would get this close and zoom, away I would fly. It was a secret gift. Second dream came in my 20s. I rescued people from burning buildings. They would be completely engulfed in flames, and somehow I would save them. It was a feat beyond human strength, and I loved the dream. The third dream came after I was married. my husband, Pilate, the mighty Roman procurator of Judea, was judging a criminal from Nazareth who had claimed to be the king of the Jews. The man had been scourged and brought before him for his crime. I must assure you, my husband knows a great deal about crime. I have seen him disguise Roman soldiers as Jews, send them to mingle in the crowds, watch for a given signal, and then turn and kill innocent Jews wantonly. I've watched him steal temple funds and spend sacred money on pet projects of his own. And once I even saw him order an attack on a religious procession of Jews. They were dressed for dying, he said. He applauded how neatly they fell into the folds of their holy garments. But this was all in his later years, when he had many chins, his brain gone, his heart turned to stone. When I married him, he was lean and handsome and full of hope. I was the one that made it possible for him to be procurator. As the granddaughter of Caesar Augustus, I was even favored enough to follow him to his assignment. So you see, in the beginning, I watched all he did with lively interest. When he had judged the man from Nazareth, I sneaked down the back stairs from my chambers to have a look at the criminal from between the curtains behind my husband's throne. "Are you the king of the Jews?" my husband was yelling. No answer. "Are you the king of the Jews?" He became enraged with the silence. The back of his neck went red, his ears inflamed like tiny lanterns on either side of his head. The air was charged with challenge. The man's blood dropped onto the flagstone. It was as though he was waiting for something. From the center of the curtains, I stuck my head out even further. The man from Nazareth slowly lifted his face till he met my eyes, raised his voice, and said deliberately to me, "Thou hast said it." I staggered backwards and dashed up the stairs and fell on my bed. How did he know I was there? Why was he talking to me? Voices reached me through my windows. They had taken him outside below my porch. Orders were given for a crown and a cloak for the king. And then I think I fainted. In my dream, I looked down at him beneath the branches of a tree. The crown of thorns on his head were arms reaching up to me. The scarlet cloak on his torn shoulders set his body on fire, and the people's arms reached higher and higher in the flames for me to save them. I knew he had the power to flee. "Fly away," I called to him. Yet he raised his head again to me, his eyes as soft and warm and full of promise as the April earth upon which he stood. It was my first experience of innocence. I had been born into power and manipulation and force, and yet I knew what he was telling me. This innocent, foolish man was going to die for me. Why? Why was he singling me out? When I awoke, I found my maid and I said, "Go to my husband and repeat this message. I have had a dream. Have nothing to do with this man. He is innocent." It was too late. Pilate commanded that the man from Nazareth should die. And from that day forward, he had decreed his own death until he finally took his life by his own hand. I found my husband's body one dark night years later. He had slashed his wrists over a basin and washed his hands in his own blood. For countless nights, over and over again, he had washed his hands, but this night was the last night. He lay beneath the basin, slumped on the flagstone like an old army boot, ill-used, the laces missing, like His dreams had vanished that April day so long ago. And since I've been introduced to the King of the Jews and have come to know the flight of innocence and the power to save, I have a message for you. Be careful what you dream. It may come true.
I always thought that I was a good husband and father until a desire for revenge came into my life and I set out to get even. Then I changed. I learned how to hate. I was a wealthy silversmith. I had my own business built up with my own talents. I did intricate work in silver. I made idols and sold them mostly to tourists, and they were expensive. My wife says people like my work because it shows the power of the gods. I keep the store well stocked. I work late every day. It's always dark when I close the door to go home to my wife. I guess you realize I haven't mentioned my child. My daughter, she is beautiful and silent. She doesn't speak. She's never said a word in her life. I've often used her as a model for my idols, but no one knows this. She's never near the shop. My wife keeps her, or I should say my wife hides her, at home. In all the years I've had my shop, I've never missed one day of work. The doors are always open. One day, my wife took me aside and said she had something very serious to discuss and begged me to understand. She began to explain. It became clear that she thought our daughter had a chance to be cured. She had heard of a Nazarene who had cured a blind man who had been blind since birth. When she told me what she had heard him preach, I knew I could never believe it, but if my wife wanted me to go for our daughter, I knew I would do anything for her happiness. My work was with the idols, and I could only believe in the strength of my own hands and the power of my own creations. That could never change. I mentioned none of this to my wife. I only told her that I would go to hear the man. I looked at my daughter wrapped in her cloak of silence, and I knew that it was going to be difficult. One only gets what one works for. The people gathered to hear the man on a steep hill. They seemed spellbound by the man's message. We had my daughter's face covered as we seldom take her out in public. I feel confused, but I remind myself my daughter is precious to me. I watch my wife listening, and I know she believes. She hasn't told me, but I can tell by the way she listens. I watch my daughter in her dumbness as the man speaks. She studies his lips. She seems to comprehend. The man is about 33, and he is comforting to hear. I guard my thoughts, and I think of the money I am losing having my shop closed. The sun begins to grow faint. I know the crowd must be hungry, yet no one moves on the hill. I don't even want to move. The words are powerful. A young man about the age of my daughter approaches the speaker. He has a basket of fish and some loaves. The man continues speaking and begins to lift fish out of the basket. 50, 70, 100, 1,000 fishes and loaf upon loaf of bread come out of the basket as though there is no bottom. The boy's eyes grow wide. The people pass the loaves and fishes. There is laughter and singing. I am laughing and singing. My wife is singing. My daughter is singing. She hands me a fish. My daughter is singing. You're speaking, I scream. Drop the fish. You are singing. I toss her high into the sky. She is laughing, and our laughter is music all over the hill. My wife cries softly with joy. We sit on the hill in the twilight, surrounded by a sea of love, and the miracle of sound, and the miracle of the loaves, and the miracle of the fishes. And it is a day never to be equaled. When I approached the shop to open early the morning of my return, it was empty, completely empty. Everything I had ever made had been taken. I had been robbed while I sat on the hill. My life's work, not one piece left. My livelihood, gone. And so, you see, revenge entered my heart, driving out gratitude and joy, and in its place a wild rage to find the thief. I wanted to kill him. I wanted him to die for making me, a poor man, left with nothing. The days passed, and in time my wish came true. The day arrived for me to see the thief die. I was a poor man now, but he would soon be a dead man, crucified for his thieving deed, and I didn't have to touch him. The Romans found him and killed him for me, and all I had to do was watch. The day of his execution arrived. 3 men were to be crucified that day. I ran to his death yelling, "Crucify him! Let's see the dog die." If the crowd yelled, I yelled louder, and when they chanted death, I chanted it faster and faster. I waited to kick him and spit on him for what he had done. And when I got up to the first man with the great beam on his back, I opened my mouth, and a wail came from my lips like a woman in labor, for there beneath my spit and screams was the rabbi who had given my daughter a voice. A great hobnailed boot came down atop his grasping hand. On that kind hand that had reached out to the multitudes, touched a blind man's eyes, and loosed my daughter's tongue into a song of praise one sunny afternoon. I followed like a dog kicked out into the rain. My mind was numb. I stayed close. What was I to do but follow? I listened in case he would speak. There was little chance he would utter a word, and yet that afternoon on the hill, everything had been so clear. Surely there would be a word from him to go on now. They hung the rabbi between 2 thieves. Towards the end, I heard the thief I had come to see ask the rabbi to save him. And I heard the answer, for I stood as close as I might stand. The thief was told he would be with the rabbi that day in paradise. I stumbled home. I'm not sure to this day what happened to my revenge. I only know my daughter, my wife, and I are disciples now. We travel with the rabbi's followers, and I preach. I tell about what I heard that day on the hill. but of what I heard that day on the cross, I'm unable to speak. The disciples call the thief on the left the good thief. And when I think of him, I smile. He was indeed a good thief to rid my shop of idols. We use the empty shop as a meeting place to break bread and to give thanks. And I am a rich man.
I have hair the color of new wine. My husband tells me that, and then he kisses me. It's like a ritual with us. He's the most clever, most handsome man in the world. We've been married 3 years, and I still tremble when I think of how much I love him. We grew up together in Cana, and we'd still be there, except my husband is so clever, he got a wonderful job here in Jerusalem. And now he's a prosperous merchant, and we have a 2-year-old daughter. Our parents are proud of us. We go back to visit them once a month. My parents actually stop arguing when they see our daughter. I guess their arguing doesn't mean anything. They've always argued for as long as I can remember. On our wedding day, they fought about how much wine to serve, and it got so bad they wouldn't even speak to each other until finally it happened. We ran out of wine. My mother ran behind the water jugs and wept. She was so embarrassed and ashamed of her temper. A friend of my grandmother's came to comfort her. She said maybe her son could help. He was there with about a dozen of his friends from Nazareth. One of his friends was very loud and funny. I remember his name was Peter. We kept calling his name and clapping while he put a goblet of wine on his forehead, went all the way down, touched the back of his head to the floor, and came back up again without spilling a drop. The mother of the man from Nazareth asked him to do something about the wine. They were deep in conversation. He seemed to be disagreeing with her. I thought, oh no, not another argument. So I got busy doing the circle dance. The next thing I knew, everyone was toasting us and saying, "Taste the new wine, wonderful deep red wine. See how it sparkles." My husband's friends didn't know what to think. One of them said he must be an Egyptian magician. Another said he did it because he forgot to bring a gift. My mother had known him since he was a little boy, and she told everyone he was a man of great faith, a truly holy man. I ran up to thank him and tell him how happy he'd made my wedding day. My face was all flushed from the dancing, and when I began to say thank you, he cupped my face in his large hands and said, "Remember, little bride, you were made for joy." I can never forget that moment. I felt so free, as though my heart were soaring. It was a time like Passover when we remember how the Lord has made us free. And so you see, he's been on my mind all morning as I prepare for the Passover feast. My husband has just gone out again. He came home to tell me the winemaker, that's what we call the man from Nazareth. His mother's name was Mary, but secretly we call him the winemaker. My husband was upset. He wouldn't tell me everything. I know he wants me to be happy here in Jerusalem. It's such a busy city, so many people. My husband just blurted it out. The winemaker was killed today. I've never seen my husband weep before. He said it was a terrible, painful death, too cruel for my ears. He left here very upset, our gentle winemaker. So kind and giving, like my mother said, a man of faith, a holy man. I just keep remembering him. I can't even get my preparations made for the Passover. So I just sit here. I poured a glass of wine in his honor and held it up to the sunlight. In my sorrow, I looked at that deep red color sparkling in the sun and remembered him. Somewhere in that wine is joy. That's what he told me to remember. I think of my own daughter and how she'll come to me on her wedding day, flushed from the dancing, to say goodbye. I'll take her face in my hands, and I'll be seeing him as I say, "Remember, little bride, you were made for joy." And she'll look at me with her eyes full of wisdom, and she'll understand. She'll know, because she has hair the color of new wine.
I was always lucky. I think women could sense that about me. I'm a winner. I was a centurion because I looked great in the uniform. Women say it's the helmet with the plume. They make lots of jokes about it, but I'll let you in on a secret. It's the muscular legs they like. I had 3 women in my life, and none of them knew about the other. Like I told you, I am lucky. You have a lot of time to think when you guard, to figure things out. It's a way to keep things moving. It gets a little slow, so we toss a few dice, tell some stories. You can't let them get to you. Like at crucifixions. They get a little out of hand at crucifixions. So they like to have big guys like me around in case the folks get too feisty. I look good, keep myself in shape. They don't try anything funny when I'm there. This last crucifixion I guarded, we tossed dice for this guy's robe. It was a seamless. I remember he was one of those false messiah guys, riffraff. We get a lot of them, but I was lucky as usual. I won the robe. Like I said, it was seamless. They're worth a little, so I took it home. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, I hear the Messiah guy's mother had made the robe. I'd had a good look at her that day. Women usually gather around in front of me. I look straight out when I'm guarding C. A soldier stands tall. I don't concern myself with the guy's face hanging up there on the cross. That's somebody else's problem. I'm just guarding. Like this, straight out. So like I said, I had myself a good look at this lady. She's older than the other women I see, but that's not important. What struck me was the way she looked back at me. I figure I'm the same age and size as her son, but I'm from some other world when it comes to this Messiah stuff. I'm just stuck on how she's looking at me. So I think, I wonder what her son would look like in my uniform. Would he look as good as I'm going to look in his seamless robe? 2 days pass. I'm not sleeping with this guy's robe in my house. The lady who made the robe knows something about me. That's it, but what? I lock the robe in a cupboard. I have some more wine, invite one of my ladies over. Nothing's working. This has never happened before. I'm not sleeping. It's getting so I don't want to eat. The seamless robe is turning into sleepless nights. No beginning, no end. I start losing my sense of time. I had to get rid of it. I didn't want it near me. Now, it was easy enough to find out where she lived. The young guy who answered the door was the same guy I saw standing with her below the cross. I said, here, I thought you might want this. And he calls her to the door. I just want to get out of there. But she comes with that face of hers, like no woman's face I ever saw before. And I'm telling you, she's seeing all of me. Up close, it's so much worse. She's seeing me good. She takes my face in her hand and says, there's something very important he wanted you to know. And I hated myself for being speechless in front of a woman. I couldn't even croak out, what? And she says in the quietest, most gentle voice I've ever known, he wanted you to know you're forgiven. I went home and slept for 3 days. Nothing's ever been the same. The helmet with the plume, the women, the wine, the image, the job. Pieces, just pieces. But I'm part of something now. It's got no beginning, no end. It was in her face. It was somehow in that robe, and it's part of me now. Like I said, I've always been lucky.
I was 14 when I came to Jerusalem for the first time. I didn't know there was going to be a crucifixion that day. My mother said I'd have to get used to that if I wanted to come into the city. She talked about how they made the thief carry his own cross. She'd only seen thieves crucified, but I remember hearing about a slave being crucified who worked at my best friend's house. But I didn't want to see it happen. I'd heard enough about how horrible it was. Sounds of it surrounded us. You couldn't help but hear the thump, thump, thump of the heavy cross beam against the cobblestones. I tried to keep my mind on my beautiful sandals that my mother had bought me. People were everywhere, jeering and yelling, a mixture of insults and encouragement, as though they were watching a dog race. There were 3 men carrying their cross beams. Mother said the first of the 3 had claimed to be the Messiah. People followed after him in a great moving mass as he inched along. As we got to the edge of the pavement to cross the street, I was suddenly separated from my mother. I had never been alone in the city before. Terror struck me. She was nowhere to be seen. The crowd was pushing me forward against my will. I looked down at my new sandals and hoped that they wouldn't get scuffed. They were beautifully jeweled. My freshly manicured toes fit snugly into the carved front opening. I remembered thinking about the tiny heel and how it would lift my leg just enough to give it a graceful curve. The teeming crowd gave one last push, and then I saw the first man. Terrible thorns were sticking out at frightening angles all over his head. He was soaked in blood and sweat. A soldier's fat arm zoomed out, striking him hard across his nose. It temporarily blinded him. In great confusion, struggling for his balance, he fell backwards, landing on his back with a great crossbeam on his chest. He had landed on top of my feet, right across my sandals. His bloodshot eyes looked directly up at me. There he was, on top of my sandals, his eyes burning into my soul. I had never seen. It was as though he was so close that I felt like I was looking at myself. It was so confusing. My mother's arm slipped round my waist from somewhere behind me, pressing me close, her tears falling on my hands, my tears mingling with hers, our hands all wet and helpless. The blow had been so forceful he could no longer see, yet they jerked him up and whipped him on his way. Blindly, he struggled to focus his eyes back in the direction he had left us as he called out into the air, his words reaching my mother's ears as well as mine and my own daughters yet to be conceived. Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, who am innocent, but weep for yourselves and for your children.
I wish you could have known my uncle. He was a wonderful storyteller, a big, blustery shepherd who took me to raise when my parents died. He invented a wonderful story for me to explain my parents' death. When I was older, I could have learned the exact details of their deaths. But there was such poetry in my uncle's images, I decided that his story was part of my heritage. I was 18 when I learned my uncle had died. They told me he had climbed to a high rocky place to rescue one of his lambs. When he reached out for it, he fell far down into a deep crevice. They were unable to recover his body. He died alone. But I comforted myself knowing that he would have liked the part in the story about them not being able to find his body. That would mean there was some mystery in his story, and he would love being part of a good story. I remember traveling the hills with him. He had funny names for each of the sheep, and he would tear pita bread into tiny figures and arrange them on the rocks for stories that he would tell me. In spite of his great love for me, I knew even as a small boy, I was never going to be a shepherd. The nights would fall to bitter cold temperatures out there on the hills. The dogs barked constantly, and the sheep's staring eyes frightened me. When they came close, their bulky shadows made ghostly images, and their wet wool dulled the air as they stared at me like frightened blind men. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my uncle woke me one night in a frenzy. I'd never seen him so shaken. "You must stay here alone," he was shouting, "and watch the sheep." There was a great thunderbolt of light. I closed my eyes, not to be blinded, as he ran away, yelling back to me, "Don't be afraid. We're going to see the Messiah." And with that, he and the other 2 shepherds disappeared. I sat up slowly, feeling very alone, trying not to see the sheep's eyes. I had never known the night to be so still. I caught the faint scent of wildflowers on a light breeze and saw the silhouette of the dogs poised as silent sentinels against the moon. In my uncertain voice, I called the sheep toward me and watched them mesmerized as they walked forward, the dew glistening off of their woolly backs. The thin black line of their mouths seemed drawn up into a grin, and their eyes caught the gleam of the stars and permeated the night with peace. I was both frightened and comforted, sure and yet mystified. And though I knew I was awake, I felt I was living one of my uncle's stories. When my uncle and the other shepherds returned, he told me the story of what they had seen: a newborn babe wrapped in swaddling clothes. He wished I might have heard the babe's mother singing. "Oh," I cried, "did she look like my mother? What did she sing?" "Well," he said, "she laid the small babe in a manger, and as we looked on his new rosy face, she crooned over and over again, ever so softly, 'Jesu, Jesu, mother's here.'" And just as with the story of my parents' death, I believed him, his deep voice booming out facts laced with poetry. And from that night on, the story stayed sweet in my memory. When I was about 38, I went to Jerusalem for the Passover. I was told a man had been crucified that afternoon for claiming to be the Messiah. Some said he had claimed he could destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. I went out into the street. The people were agitated. They reminded me of the night my uncle had left me on my own for the first time. I was recalling his voice. "We're going to see the Messiah," when lightning struck, causing the afternoon sun to grow dark as midnight. In the darkness, I recalled the sheep's eyes staring at me, waiting for me to wake up and take charge of my destiny. The light flashed bright again, and I began finding my way toward the crucifixion site. By this time, the late afternoon light was fading, but I could still make out the sign over the middle cross where they were busy taking the crucified man's body down, the one who'd claimed to be the king of the Jews. Just then, a slight, wiry man they were calling Joseph approached and beseeched me to help. They must complete their task before the sun set. Hurriedly, I lifted my share and carried his twisted body forward. We were almost running. As we swept past a huddled group of women, one who looked a little older followed our path with her hand, crooning softly as we passed. "Jesu, Jesu, mother's here." Against all odds, we labored, wrapping his body in burial cloths that Joseph had provided. I thought of that babe wrapped in swaddling clothes laid in a manger, and wondered if they had rushed to that cave as we were rushing to the tomb. When I helped give the last push to the great stone covering the burial entrance, I pondered the end to his story. Would his body perhaps never be found? Would the details surrounding his death be embellished? A young man called John announced the task was complete, and the small band wandered together into the night, leaving me alone in the night. and as I turned to leave, I caught the faint scent of wildflowers and noted the soldiers standing guard as though to keep the moon away. I'd never known the night to be so still. I took my first step into the waiting darkness and whispered to myself and to my dead uncle, "Don't be afraid. We're going to see the Messiah."
You know what happened to me when I was 12 years old? I died. I did. My mother doesn't know it, but I've collected coins from the children for telling them about it. I would get in terrible trouble if she knew. They say, "Tell us what it was like." And I explain, it was like falling down a well, like the inside of Jacob's well. Everything close and dark. And then I heard a man's voice coming from the top of the well. It came down to me in echoes, like a chant from way up at the top, where there was a tiny pinpoint of light. And the voice called me closer and closer to the light, where his arms reaching to pull me out. And the next thing I knew, I was in my mother's arms, eating sweets and drinking warm goat's milk. The man from Galilee who called me out of the well didn't stay long that day, but I remember the way he looked at me so lovingly and smiled at me, and every part of me felt joyful. After that, my mother took me to hear him talk many times, and I could understand what he was talking about. But what I enjoyed the most was sitting with him afterwards and visiting. He always had grape juice stains and olive oil footprints on his robe from the smaller children, and we would all laugh together. Over and over again, when my mother put me to bed, I'd say, "Tell me again how the man from Galilee called to me." And she'd say, he wanted his little girl to get up. And I'd say, "No, say the word he said." She would laugh and say, "It means, child, arise." And I'd say, "No, say the word the way he said it." And finally she'd say, "Talita kum." Isn't that lovely? My mother said he was speaking to my heart. That's how I heard him. I'm here alone tonight because it's been secretly arranged for me to meet 3 women. One of them is Joanna, whose husband works in Herod's palace. She helped me arrange everything. I sneaked out from my room in the dark of early morning. My mother doesn't know I'm here. Now, I must say out loud why I am here. It's very hard. The man from Galilee is dead. The man who called to me was crucified. He's buried in Joseph Arimathea's tomb. The 3 women are going to anoint him in the morning. They don't know it, But before they roll back the stone, I'm going to call him like he called me. Oh, not out loud, silently. I'll remind him he's been through so much. Surely, if he said it to himself, Talita cum. Say it to yourself. Talita cum. Say it to yourself. Talita cum. Say it to yourself.
And now, as our Savior Jesus Christ has taught us, we are bold to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. When we are in worship, we try hard not to applaud. However, this is technically not a worship service. Let us go forth in the name of the Lord.